The nervous system can be divided into two major divisions, the central nervous system, or the CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS. The CNS consists of the brain and spinal cord, while the PNS consists of all the long nerves that extend throughout the body like electrical wiring through a house. The spinal cord is the brain-body connection. Like a two-way street, it has traffic in the form of electrical signals moving in both directions, from body to brain and brain to body. Cranial nerves and spinal nerves are part of the PNS. The 12 pairs of cranial nerves are located on the undersurface of the brain, so they can send information directly to the brain without going through the spinal cord. The 31 pairs of spinal nerves extend from the spinal cord to all different parts of the body. They send impulses to the spinal cord and up to the brain. Some nerves in the PNS are classified as autonomic nerves that carry information about involuntary activities, such as blood pressure and digestion, while others are classified as somatic motor nerves that carry information about voluntary muscle movements to the brain. Lastly, there are sensory nerves that carry sensory information, such as touch, pressure, and hot-cold temperatures to the brain. Some sensory nerves carry information directly to the brain, while others run through the spinal cord first. Whatever the path taken, the CNS and PNS must work together to regulate normal body functions. Neurons consist of three parts: the cell body, the dendrites, and the axon. The main part of the neuron is called the cell body. The nucleus of the neuron lies within the cell body. Dendrites are projections that transmit impulses to the neuron's cell body. There may be one or several dendrites that project from the cell body of the neuron. One elongated projection transmits impulses away from the cell body, and this is known as the axon. On many neurons outside the central nervous system, the axon is surrounded by a white, fatty substance known as myelin that is formed by Schwann cells. The outer cell membrane of a Schwann cell is called the neurolemma. This membrane is present on many of the peripheral nervous system axons, but is not present on the axons of the central nervous system. Neurolemma plays a critical role in the regeneration of damaged axons, and so, as a result, the repair of brain and spinal cord neurons is extremely limited. Nodes of Ranvier are indentations between adjacent Schwann cells. The nodes are areas of the axon that are not covered by myelin. In summary, the primary function of neurons is to conduct impulses. Dendrites conduct impulses toward the cell body, and axons conduct impulses away from the cell body. The nerve impulse is an electrical signal that conveys information along a neuron. The series of events that causes the electrical charge inside a nerve cell to convey information and go from a resting state to a depolarized state and back to a resting state is known as the action potential or nerve impulse. We begin with the resting or polarization phase. In this state, the chief intracellular ions include the positively charged potassium ions, K+, and several negatively charged ions or anions. During the resting state, the potassium ions tend to leak out of the cell. When they do, they take the positive charge with them, resulting in a negative environment within the cell. When the neuron is stimulated, the membrane becomes permeable to sodium and allows sodium ions, Na+, to cross over the membrane into the cell. This increase in sodium with the diffusion of positive charges changes the inside of the cell, making it now a positive environment. This is depolarization. After the impulse has passed through, the cell membrane again changes. It no longer allows the diffusion of sodium into the cell. In fact, the sodium begins to be removed by pumps located within the membrane of the neuron. It also allows potassium to once again diffuse out of the cell. This outward movement of the positively charged potassium ions removes the positive charge from the inside of the cell and leaves behind the negatively charged ions, which causes repolarization. If the traveling impulse encounters a section of membrane covered with myelin, it jumps around the myelin. This type of impulse travel is much faster than is possible in non-myelinated sections and is known as saltatory conduction. A synapse helps information move from one neuron to another. Three structures make up a synapse: a synaptic knob, a synaptic cleft, and the plasma membrane of a postsynaptic neuron. The synaptic knob is a tiny bulge at the end of the terminal branch of a presynaptic neuron's axon. The space between the two neurons is known as the synaptic cleft. The postsynaptic membrane is the plasma membrane of the receiving dendrite. When a nerve impulse arrives at the synaptic knob, neurotransmitter molecules are released from the vesicles into the synaptic cleft. The plasma membrane of a postsynaptic neuron has protein molecules embedded in it opposite each synaptic knob. These serve as receptors that bind the neurotransmitter and initiate an impulse in the postsynaptic membrane so that the impulse can continue on its journey. After the impulse has passed, the neurotransmitter activity for that impulse is rapidly terminated. This can occur as a result of molecules diffusing out of the synaptic cleft back into the synaptic knobs, or by the action of specific enzymes on neurotransmitters, which metabolize the neurotransmitters into inactive compounds. Each of the main divisions of the brain serves multiple and important functions. We will highlight just a few to allow you to visualize the amazing aspects of the brain. The parietal lobe interprets our sense of touch, identifies size, shapes, and colors, and provides spatial perception. The temporal lobe assists us in sequencing, hearing, and memory. The frontal lobe is responsible for our personality, our emotions, problem-solving, and speaking or expressive language. The occipital lobe is where our vision is interpreted. Balance, coordination, and skilled motor activity are the functions of the cerebellum. And the brainstem is responsible for breathing, heart rate, and vasomotor control. Finally, the diencephalon is responsible for body temperature, appetite, and sleep cycle control. 12 pairs of cranial nerves emerge from the inferior surface of the brain. The olfactory nerve carries information from the nose to the brain and is concerned with the sense of smell. The optic nerve carries visual information from the eye to the brain for the sense of sight. The oculomotor nerve causes movement of the eyeball and contraction of the extrinsic eye muscles to raise the eyelid. It also constricts the pupil of the eye. The trochlear nerve also causes contraction of the extrinsic eye muscles to move the eyeball. The trigeminal nerve carries information regarding touch, pressure, and pain from the face, scalp, and teeth to the brain. It also innervates the muscles of mastication. The abducens nerve controls eye movements by innervating an extrinsic eye muscle that causes eye movement, and by carrying information regarding the sensation of eye movement to the brain. The facial nerve carries sensory information regarding taste and performs motor function by contracting the muscles of facial expression, secretion of saliva, and tears. The vestibulocochlear nerve carries information for hearing and sense of balance from the ear to the brain. The glossopharyngeal nerve carries sensory information regarding taste from the posterior tongue and aids in reflex control of blood pressure and respiration. Motor functions of the glossopharyngeal include stimulating the secretion of salivary glands and also stimulating sensations of the throat and the swallowing movement. The vagus nerve carries sensations to and produces movements of the organs supplied by it. Examples include slowing the heart, increasing peristalsis, contracting muscles for voice production, and aiding in the swallowing process. The accessory nerve stimulates shoulder movements, turning movements of the head, movements of viscera, and voice production. The hypoglossal nerve stimulates tongue movements. The autonomic conduction pathway requires a relay of at least 2 autonomic motor neurons. The first neuron, called the preganglionic neuron, has its dendrites and cell body located in the brain or spinal cord. Its axon leaves the CNS and synapses with a second neuron, referred to as the postganglionic neuron, in an autonomic ganglion. The dendrites and cell body of the second neuron are located in the autonomic ganglion. The axon of the second neuron, the postganglionic, leaves the ganglion and goes to the effector organ. A chain of ganglia called the sympathetic chain extends longitudinally across the sides of the vertebral column. Neurons may synapse here or in collateral ganglia outside the sympathetic chain, but still close to the vertebral column. Remember, there are at least 2 neurons in the autonomic conduction pathway, one prior to the ganglion, preganglionic, and one after the ganglion, postganglionic, and they synapse at the ganglion. Observe how neurotransmitters are released at the point of the ganglionic synapse and the effector synapse as impulses travel through. In the parasympathetic conduction pathway, acetylcholine, ACH, is the neurotransmitter released at both the ganglionic synapse and the synapse at the effector site. Now watch the sympathetic conduction pathway. Acetylcholine, ACH, is the neurotransmitter released at the ganglionic synapse, but norepinephrine, NE, is secreted into the synapse at the effector site. This signals the same effector with 2 different neurotransmitters so that it can differentiate which system is providing the stimulus and then supply the appropriate response. Remember that many organs are dually innervated. Those fibers that release acetylcholine are considered cholinergic fibers. 3 of the 4 fiber types are cholinergic: the sympathetic preganglia, the parasympathetic preganglia, and the parasympathetic postganglia. Fibers secreting norepinephrine are considered to be adrenergic. Only the sympathetic postganglionic fiber is adrenergic.